evening, everybody, and thank you for coming out today. We are going to talk a little bit about the Louisiana Legislative session and just the legislature in general. So like I like to do at the beginning of these types of workshops, I want to ask a few questions before we jump right into anything. Does anybody know how many sections or houses our legislature has? Two, right. Can anybody tell me how many members are in the lower house? Trick question. Do you know which one is the lower house?
Nope.
All right. Well, y'all came to the right place because you're going to find out. You're going to find out. So the workshop objectives are for you guys to know how to effectively navigate the legislative resources, empower you to engage with the session with your legislators, and to advocate for issues that matter to your community. That's me doing exactly that during last year's legislative session. Some of y'all have seen that picture before. That is in the House. No, that's the Senate Finance Committee. There was a bill that was going to change a bunch of stuff to make it really bad for kids. And I went and provided testimony. I'm the community organizer here. That's part of my job. And I'm going to teach you how to do it if you want to. So who can tell me when the legislative session started this year? Anybody know? It was just a couple of days ago.
Yeah. A couple of days ago. Well,
That's not the answer.
9th, maybe?
Yes, March 9th, exactly. So it starts March 9th. It ends June 1st, unless the governor, for some reason, has a desire to extend the session. Hopefully he does not, though. So we're just a little bit in. Pre-filing ended already. The late filing deadline ends on March 31st. So even though there are 1,300 and some odd bills right now, there's a couple weeks where some more stuff might get thrown in. And so we're going to teach you how to track those bills, go through those bills, figure out which ones are the ones that you actually care about, and all that good stuff. This is the most important part of the policy-making process for regular citizens. And the reason being is this is when you actually get to engage more than any other time. So we're gonna talk a little bit about the structure of our legislature, and then we'll go from there. So like I said, we have two sections. We have the House and the Senate. The House is made up of 105 single members. They all represent a single member district. They have 3-year term spans for a total of 12 years. But there's a little asterisk there. Does anybody know what the loophole to that 12 years is?
I think if you special election to fill a vacant spot, you can do a little more than 12. No?
That was not what my asterisk for, but you're right.
Yeah.
Good job. Okay. What else could that possibly? Not consecutive. So technically, I can serve 12 years, wait a little while, and then go right back. Yeah, it's kind of weird because, we use the term career politician all the time, right? And even though the term limits are meant to prevent that, there's still some ways around it to get back in there. The single member districts are based on population. That is almost all of the House. We're missing one person. If you go on their website, there's a little box on there, and he's actually the leader of the House. Mr. DeVilliers is not in this picture, but it's because I couldn't zoom out anymore and get them all to fit, and so that's what we have. So, and then over here on the Senate side, we have 39 members. They have 4-year term periods. They are limited to 10 years or 2.5 technically terms. And there's an asterisk there, so who knows what the asterisk for? I'll give you a hint. It's the same as that. Non-consecutive. And so the Senate is considered the upper house, and the House is the lower house. So that's the answer to that previous trick question there. So the way our legislature works is even years, they have fiscal sessions. Odd years, they have a general session. Does anybody know the difference between the two? Fiscal is budget. So all of your bills that deal with taxes, tax severances, all that good stuff. Anything budget, taxes, money-wise is even years. And so this year is a what? General or fiscal?
General. Right?
What year this is?
Oh, this is the fiscal year.
There you go. And so general years, which would be odd number years, it's anything goes. I say, but it's pretty much, there doesn't have to be the concentration on the fiscal bills. They're able to carry other stuff. The days during the session are kind of split. The mornings are when they have the committee hearings, and they go into the committee rooms and they deliberate things, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. The afternoons are for the floor sessions, or that's when the actual full votes take place. Now, there's also special sessions. Can anybody tell me what a special session is and what the point of it is?
The governor normally calls them?
Yes, the governor calls them. Why does he call them?
Because he feels like it. Yeah.
That's actually the answer. That is literally the answer. If he has a particular issue that he wants to focus on, he can call a special session. Now, fun fact, Jeff Landry has called a special session every year that he's been in office so far. And so lately, we've been hearing the word voter fatigue. That's why. Because it seems like even though the session just started, it seems like we just got out of session, but it wasn't a session, it was a special session. And so it just seems like it's all starting to run together, right? And so for people that do track all of this, it's getting to be a lot. That picture, before it goes, I'll go back real quick. So this picture is actually on the floor. That board behind them actually shows everybody's names. And so when they vote, if a vote is a yes, it turns green. If it's a no, it turns red. And you can see in real time who's voting for what. Now, if they're not there, it's not going to light up. But all of these pictures of the inside of the legislature that you see in this slideshow have actually come from my phone. Like, they're actual pictures that I took, because that's how much time I spent at the legislature. So how a bill becomes a law. Anybody think they can just run me through a brief 1-2 or how that happens?
A legislator has an idea for a bill, they get it drafted. I know that they present it, they read it in the main thing, it gets recommended to a committee. The committee talks about it, the committee approves, if the committee says it's good to go, it'll go to a vote in that house. And then it does the same process basically in the other house. And then I think if it gets, then it becomes an act, and then the governor has to sign it.
That is
Yeah.
That's really good. Most people do not know that much. You hit on the
though,
yeah.
They amend it, then it goes back to the house.
Right.
That.
There's a few little things there. We'll talk about that. That was a really good. That's a really good overview. Thank you. You want to come help me next time I do this? That was real good. But the only thing I have a question. You said a legislator has an idea for a bill and they get it drafted.
Yeah.
Anybody.
Normally they're working with other people. It seems like.
Yes.
Yeah.
That first of all, I don't know many people that can sit up there and write some. Y'all know how long some of them take?
Yeah.
Write all of that by themselves most of the time, and then most of them carry 5, 10. There's multiple bills, so yeah, they're
obvious that someone else is actually writing them.
Well, they have their staff, agencies,
right.
and organizations and researchers. Like anybody can pretty much say, "Hey, I have a bill." I have an idea, and then they become, So that's good, great understanding of that. That early stage, though, that idea stage is really important because that's when the first layer of community input, I would say, comes in because an idea is great, but if it's an idea that don't affect nobody but you, does it do anything? Is it any point in spending the money that it takes to go through the legislative process if it doesn't, right? So that early stage is very important. And then, yes, they go to the drafting stage. So the wording of the bill happens in that stage. Now, does that mean the wording of a bill doesn't change later? No, it doesn't. But that's where the purpose, the scope, and the impact of the bill really, it goes from an idea to a tangible concept, right? And so that stage is very critical. What happens after they flesh that out? Can anybody tell me? They file it.
Yeah.
What happens when it's filed?
It's recommended to a committee? And then
Not quite. First, it's assigned a number.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, first it's assigned a number. So it's given a number based on when it was filed in the order. And then it gets assigned to a committee, and that's what allows it to move forward. So again, the pre-filing is the first stage. Then you have the post-deadline, and then there's some exemptions to that. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit. Does anybody know when the pre-filing deadline is? It already passed, but like, do you know the rule for it? 5 p.m. the calendar day before the session starts. So if session started March 9th, this session, when was the filing deadline? Pre-file.
The day before? I'm sorry.
You're eating.
Yeah. Ain't a calendar.
It was a little bit on that. It was actually the 7th.
Yeah,
It was a Friday.
It was like a weekend.
Yeah, it was a Friday before. The post deadline limit, like I said, is the 31st for this year. And during that time, does anybody know how many bills they can introduce?
5, right?
Only 5. Once that pre-filing is over, you got 5 more chances to get something in there, and if you don't, then that's it. Do you think there's ever a time that a legislator doesn't carry a bill at all?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Is that a good thing?
No.
No. No. There's a reason I brought that up. So there's some exemptions. Again, that 5 bill limit after the session starts doesn't apply to certain things like general appropriation. Anybody know that word appropriation when we talk about legislative stuff? Funding, typically. It's like the designation of resources. Appropriation. Capital outlay bills, and then, you know, it's really funny. All the exemptions are really pertaining to money. Which is, it's kind of sad because policy is so much more than that, but that's what they are. It don't want to go to the next slide. All right, there we go. So that next step, it goes to committee. So how do you think committees are assigned?
I think the speaker, like Speaker of the House, President of the Senate. No.
Yeah, but how do they do it?
Yeah.
They draw straws. It's by category, right? So if I have a bill that's about criminal justice, do you think the education committee is gonna?
Oh, I thought you meant
get my bill?
Who?
No, just how they do it.
Oh yeah.
It's by category.
Yeah.
Why are committee hearings really the most crucial part of the legislative process? Does anybody know?
Because it's discussions and amendments that shape the bill's future.
Yeah, but can't that happen on the floor too?
Yes.
Yeah.
So why is this so much more important?
From what I can tell, it seems like they get amended the most in committee.
That's where they get amended the most, and honestly, that's where bills go to die.
Yeah, no, sometimes they never make it out of committee.
That's the answer.
Yeah.
It's important because most of the time, if it don't get out of that first, it's gonna die.
Yeah.
And so committee hearings are important for us as the general public. Why?
It's a good time for input.
This is where if you support a bill or you don't support a bill, that it's most important that you show up. Because, for example, I'm just gonna throw something out there. Last session, there were some bills about some systems that would track certain data for the juvenile justice system, right? And the first committee hearing, there was hardly anybody there, and a few people were like, "We're against this," but they submitted their income, and so it kind of went through.
Yeah.
The next time it came up, the room was packed, and there were all these youth justice organizations and all these youth mentoring organizations and all these parents that had kids that had been adjudicated in the juvenile justice system and all this stuff, and they were all, we were there for probably about 4 or 5 hours just listening to testimony after testimony after testimony about why this was a bad idea. So guess what? Then it was changed. It didn't go away, but they started listening to some of the concerns, and they were like, well, yeah, that could be a problem. Let's take this out, and let's do that, and then it went back, right? So that public input in committee, public input when a bill is proposed, like right before everything starts, that's cool, right? But the public input during that part of the process is literally the most important thing. Does every legislator decide what happens with every bill?
They eventually get to vote if it gets out of committee. So.
Eventually they get to
No.
vote, but do
Yeah.
they personally?
Not
No.
necessarily, no.
And why is that? Can anybody tell me? Let me ask you a question. I just said it's 1,300 some odd bills.
Yeah.
You think every legislator reads every
No.
page of all the bill? No. So what do they typically do?
I'm assuming that they rely on the committee to hash it out before it gets to the floor.
They rely on the committee, and then they also, from there, it's kind of like a hierarchy, right? The committee makes its recommendation, it gets through, it doesn't, and then based on what of the committee members typically determines how somebody votes. Typically. Their party,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
If you're not reading this, but everybody else that's in your party that you look up to or you respect or whatever, they say this is a good thing, you're probably gonna vote what? Yeah. If everybody says it's not a good thing, you're probably gonna vote no. Does that always work in our favor? No. Most of the time, it honestly doesn't. But so, for example, I'll give a great example that's pertinent to the work that we do here for A Better Bayou. There were some eminent domain bills that went out a couple years ago, and a bunch of people didn't read them, and some people kind of read them, and
That's a really good example.
and then everybody passed it. You know, it passed through without hardly no objections, right? And now that we're seeing what those bills actually allow to happen, a lot of people, especially in one party, are like, wait, I wouldn't have voted for that. But it's because they didn't understand it, but they were voting along whatever the other people told them to do. And so that's how we got here. And oddly enough, that happens quite often.
Yeah.
So once something comes out of committee, let's say we have a really good bill and it gets out of the committee, where does it go after that?
Floor debate? The floor?
It goes to the full chamber from whatever committee says. If it's a House bill, and then it goes to the House floor, and then it goes, if it goes from there by majority vote, because it can also be amended there on the floor. It can be debated there on the floor. But if it does pass by majority vote, where does it go after that?
The other house.
It goes to the other house.
And then it gets recommended to the committee.
Yep. So if it started in the House and it came out of there, then it goes to the Senate. If it started in the Senate, it comes out of there and then goes to the House. And then the whole process starts over again. Then you go to the committee for that House, and then it goes to the floor. And then, what happens?
Where are we at in the process?
That's why I'm here.
Yeah. Wait, so it's past both houses? Is that where we're at? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yes.
Kinda.
Okay. Because if it passes both houses with no amendments, doesn't it then go to be signed by the governor or no? Am I
Yes.
missing a step?
Kinda.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, we're gonna pause right there.
Okay.
So the bills are reviewed, they're assessed. So this is an actual committee room. Again, this came off my phone from last time. I was in the hallway, and I wasn't in that committee hearing because I was in another one. But I wanted to be nosy and see what they was talking about, so I took a picture of it. And then this, I wanted to include this because I thought it was very interesting. This is a picture of a debate on the floor. How many of you, when you think of the debate, when you talk about legislature, how many of you have actually like watched them do that?
I've watched some of them. It's fun.
Would you, if you've never watched them do it before, would you think that they actually went like one-on-one to the microphone? Because as you can see, that's literally what they do. It gets real spicy in there sometime when they be at the microphones like that. This particular picture, that is Regina Barrow, who right now has a very hot button bill about dismantling DCFS, if any of you are keeping up with that. And this is the lovely Heather Cloud. And this moment was very contentious, to say the least. Ms. Cloud made a comment about children in Louisiana being lost causes. And let's just say there was a very visceral reaction from the entire room. And so it got very heated. I've seen, there's some finger pointing that gets real close to pokes, and it gets real interesting. But I tell people all the time, people say, oh, politics is so boring. No, it ain't. If you really pay attention, it's not. But after those debates, sometimes committee chairs can do what? Do we know what can happen? They can block things from continuing in the process, and they can also advance things under certain circumstances without it going through the normal process. So that's why I wanted to kind of say, kinda, sometimes it goes to the left, sometimes not. But once it does, there he is. Definitely agree. So once something goes through, the governor can either sign it and it does what?
Either, yeah, he signs it, becomes law, or
It becomes law.
He can veto it.
He can veto it. What does veto mean?
He's blocking it, and then what is you need like a 2/3 vote to override a veto.
You getting ahead of me, girl. But yes. No, that's okay. I like it. I'm glad you're thinking about it. And then what happens if he don't do nothing?
I think it becomes the law still.
After
a certain period of
there's a waiting period.
Yeah.
I don't know. I can't recall anything recently that was like a big deal that happened with because it doesn't really happen. Veto override. Yes, you are right. If the governor says no, I'm not signing this. This is not going to become a law. The rest of the legislature can vote, and if 2/3 of them agree, they can override his veto, and something can still become law. Now, it doesn't happen very often, but it is very powerful. Now, why is participation in this part of the process, when it gets to the governor, when it's waiting on him, almost as important as participation in committee? Because you can get him to change his mind.
Pressure, yeah.
Yep, and as I say, public pressure at that stage can still send something the other direction than what they initially thought it was going to go. And what type of public pressure am I talking about when I say that? At that stage, what does it typically take?
I don't know.
Typically,
protesting on the Capitol steps.
That's exactly it. Mass demonstrations, huge, even disruptive things. We talk a lot about people participating in our political processes, and we also talk a lot about doing it certain ways. But disruption has been an effective tool in politics for a very long time. Is it always recommended? No, but it can work, especially in dire situations when you have certain stuff going on. This particular picture are members of a council. That's me. That was created by a piece of legislation. It wasn't created by Governor Landry. It was created by Governor John Bel Edwards. But that particular piece of legislation did not have support from Mr. Landry, and he was trying to figure out if the council still needed to exist. And so due to a campaign with a lot of public pressure, as you can see, his pictures in the background, we still exist and we still meet quarterly as it stands. So public pressure, especially those large demonstrations, and also sometimes agency support, right? So for us, our particular council it dealt with issues of incarceration. And so having the newly appointed head of the DOC that he put in place come and say, hey, I think they're doing good things, it changed it for us. So any kind of particular public pressure, especially when the governor is worried about an issue, right? If it's something that's really big optically, if it's something that's really big funding wise, it can have things shift a little. Now, let's talk about what happens when we actually do participate in those committee hearings. Some of you came to our public comment workshop, which thank you for that too. But this is a little different than local meetings. And so we're going to talk about some of the ways why. Can anybody tell me, do you have to, can anybody go to a committee hearing?
I think so. Right? Committees are open.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Committees are open. How do you?
Debate's not though, correct?
Wait, say it again.
Like the floor debate, you can't go to that, can you? You can. Okay.
So the thing is, it's a lot more limited space wise. And so we'll talk about that in just a second. The comment cards. So before you can participate in the session, well, not before, but when you go to do that, first things first, I'm just going to tell you, if you're the type of person that carries a bag and you carry things that you're not supposed to have in your bag, I suggest that, you go back to your car if you're going to participate in session, because they search everything. And so after you go through security, you have to find your committee room. How do you know which room these committees are in? How do you figure that out? I'll tell you one thing. It's not the mall. There's no, in the mall, there's like, you are here. They don't do that. They don't make it very easy for you to figure those things out. So there's no maps, no anything like that. So how do you figure it out? The Louisiana Legislature website. That's the best place that I tell regular everyday people to know. Now, there are people that do this for a living, that are there all the time, that know where these rooms are and know which committees typically meet in which rooms and that kind of thing. But, and if you can find one of those people, that's great. Ask them. But the easiest way to figure out where they're going to be is the legislature website, because they have the agenda on there. I'm going to go back just a second. This thing that I took the picture, it's not clear because the picture, but this is what the agenda looks like if it was printed, and that's kind of how it shows up on the legislature page. But it'll tell you at the top what time that committee starts, which room it's in, and it gives you a full agenda of what they're actually going to be talking about, who brought that measure, all that good stuff. The legislature website also has all that stuff in detail, and so we're going to do kind of like a live walkthrough in a minute of the legislature website, because that's probably the most important tool that you have. I'll just be 100% honest. So you go in, you figure out what room you're going to be in, and then you fill out a comment card. Those of you who came to the regular public comment session that we had, you kind of already familiar with comment cards. They're similar, but they're not quite the same, and we're going to talk about what the differences are. So they are color-coded. If you go to your little workbook here, we're going to flip around in this quite a little bit now that we're at this stage. You go to the page with the comment card on it here. I'll tell you, those witness cards, there's 3 colors: red, green, and white. I guess it's Christmassy. I don't know why they do that. But a red is to, in the House, a red card is an affirmation in opposition. So you don't support a bill. Mm-hmm. If it's green, you're expressing and you do support a bill. But what if you support or don't support, but you don't want to speak? Do you have to speak if you fill out one of these cards? No. There's a little checkbox on there. If you look at it, it says, although I do not wish to speak, I'm present and in opposition. Or it'll say support if it's a green card. And you're going to put all your information there because, again, all these cards go on public record. Anything that you do, and that's something that I try to tell people to be mindful of, anything that you do or say when you're participating in these processes, it goes into the record. So whatever you put on your card, if somebody goes and looks at the minutes or they request it, they're going to see your comments. I think that's something that, especially in today's political climate, depending on what you do for a living, that you have to be aware of, because sometimes obviously we have the right to express our opinions, but also our employers have the right to not agree, and sometimes that leads to damaging things for people's livelihoods. So just be mindful of that. So you put all your information there, and on the back of those cards, they're pretty cool. They actually have all the committee rules. It tells you how the amendments work. It tells you how any prepared statements. So if you have, like, let's say there's a bill about education, and I work in a school system, or I'm adjacent to a school system, and so I have all this data that I've collected about this particular bill and how it's going to affect the students in this school system. Can I actually present something with that data on it to them? Or do I just have to talk? You can, but it has to be done in advance. And there are rules for it, right? So if you have handouts, if you have a written prepared statement, it has to be given, you have to have a sufficient number of copies. So every committee member that's there that day has to have a copy of whatever it is that you're giving. You have to give it to the committee staff, and you have to have 5 extra copies on top of that. I guess in case something happens or another staff member, whatever the case might be, you have to have all those things. And it has to be given. You cannot do it. You can't have like a flash drive. It has to be physical copies. It has to be sent to their mailbox. Like you can't just, there's a lot of rules to it. And that's kind of why you have to prepare in advance if you're going to do these things. And that's why a lot of times people just don't do it because they're not aware. But it's on the back of those cards. And then when you get up there, you're basically giving testimony. We say public comment, but it's a testimony. And so you're under oath. Anything that you say, you need to be telling the truth. We can't be up there making up stories. And it's pretty effective. And so you sign that card, and that's how they hold you to that. That's where that accountability comes in. Now, there's also a white card. We talked about the red card. We talked about the green card. What's the white card? Anybody know?
Information only.
Information only. What does that mean? So let's say there's a bill Department of Health, and I work for the Department of Health, so I can't publicly have an opinion, but I know some stuff, so I can give them the information. I just can't state whether I support or oppose it, right? And you don't have to work for that entity to do that. Sometimes you just, maybe you're a research scientist and you're neutral, but you got some information. Yeah, that's a great correlation there, just like an expert witness. Good job. And so anybody, they got a bunch of names on these. Can anybody tell you what that is? Okay. So when you're on the House side, you just walk in, you fill out your card, you give it to the security people, they go give it to the secretary for the committee. In the committee rooms, that's how it goes. When you're on the House side, it's a little different. It's divided into South side, North side. These cards, if you want to speak to your senator or your representative, your senator, you have to know which side they're on, which door to go to, and you got to get the right color card that matches their side, or you can't talk to them. Those cards are different because you give it directly to the staff, and they give it directly to that senator, and then there's a little box at the bottom of that you can check, and it says, "I wish to speak directly with them." So if they have a chance. There's these little ropes, and that's why I said the space is a little different. It's a very narrow area that they have seats in. And if you don't get there soon enough, you can't sit there because there's no room. You cannot stand in the aisles. You can't stand on the other side of the rope. They're very particular about that. Very particular about that. I almost got in trouble one time for standing in the wrong spot. When I didn't know, before I knew how that worked, I was just standing. I was like, I'm watching. And they were like, leave or you're going to get arrested. I was like, okay. So you have to have the right card in the right color. You fill it out and you hand it to them. Now, if you check that box that you want to speak to them, do they have to speak to you? No. Does it make them look bad? Yes. Especially if you're one of these people, right? The Baton Rouge legislators, they're in town. It's not as New Orleans, okay, you're an hour away. But if you drove away from, let's say, Alexandria or Shreveport, or even here, right? And you give them that card and you say, hey, I'd like to talk to you, and then they don't talk to you. It's not the best thing, though. But it happens. It definitely happens. So you can have those cards in, you can speak to your senator, you can give public testimony. For those of you who came to the public comment thing, they are timed. Usually that time is anywhere from a minute to 3 minutes. The standard is 3. But sometimes, let's say, like that day we were there and there were hundreds of people like trying to cram into that room. They cut us to, they cut the time out. There's a little timer in the corner of them. It's a digital timer, so they'll tell you, you have 30 seconds left, you have 15 seconds left. So you can see it. Sometimes those timers don't work because it's like an electronic system, and there's a staffer that kind of runs it all. Sometimes it's just broken, and sometimes, let's say, the staffer that's supposed to be there isn't there, and somebody that doesn't know how to do it is there, or the committee chair is a new chair, and they don't know how to do it, and so that happens sometimes, but you always kind of rehearse your speeches and stuff ahead of time, so you know what you're saying anyway. I have seen sometimes where there's hardly anybody there, or it's a particularly moving story. So, for example, last year there were some things about the opioid crisis, and some families showed up with like photos of their loved ones that had been affected by it, and they were telling these really emotional, really moving stories. So everybody kind of didn't care about the time limits because these people were kind of like bearing their souls. So it does happen. Sometimes it happens strategically. I've seen where the next issue on the agenda has a lot of people there, and they don't want to sit through all those people, or they don't want to deal with that particular issue, so they will stall it. It happens. They don't say that, but when you're in the room, you get the feel for what exactly is going on. Yes.
Is there time, like these committee meetings? How long do they last? Is it like is it a definite amount of time they can go on? Is it a scheduled endpoint?
That's a great question. Sometimes they do have scheduled endpoints. Usually it just has like a start time. They'll say 9:30, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. Usually they'll go until it's like time to break for lunch.
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll pick right back up in the middle of an agenda. Usually they try to get to the end of something before they break, but sometimes it doesn't always happen that way. I've been in fact, that same one with the opioid thing, one time we were there and our item was supposed to be like third on the agenda, and they ended up being before us. And we sat through about 4 hours of just their testimony, and so we got bumped from the docket for the docket from the day. Because it was after lunch, and they were like, yeah, everybody needs to go home, so y'all come back another day. And then we had to wait, because then that's the thing. The next day's agenda is already prepared. So you get to go back the next day. You have to wait until they put you back on the agenda. And so it gets pretty funny sometimes. So let's talk about this website. That's what the Louisiana Legislature website looks like. What I will say is, it looks simple, like just looking at it. It's a little more complicated than you think. However, believe it or not, Louisiana has one of the best legislature websites in the country. I have tried to navigate other states' websites, and I was like, what is this? And then sometimes, like, I will say our legislature is really good about making sure that the minutes are up, the agendas are up. There's a little arrow if you click on any particular agenda, and it moves in real time, and it tells you what agenda item that they're on, and it updates. It's very accurate. It updates really well. They usually all of the agendas for like the week are already up a week in advance, sometimes longer. So they're really good about that. We do have a good kind of feel for what's going on. The live stream server is very good. Again, in comparison to some other states, it's very good. It works very well. I sometimes, if I can't make it to the legislature and there's something in committee, I will just pull it up on my computer and watch it the whole day. Our search tools on our legislative website are absolutely amazing. And so I'm going to show you how to use some of those things in just a second. You see? Okay. So this is that home page. This is what it looks like. So as you see, it says the House will convene Monday at 2. So they don't have any committee meetings Monday morning. They're usually on Mondays. They start later. Because you have to remember, the legislature, so Fridays, let me say that. On Fridays, there's nothing in committee, nothing in session. Everybody goes to their district. It's a district working day. And then over the weekend, and so then they have to give time for everybody to travel back. Because, some people live 2-3 hours away. And then the Senate convenes Monday at 4:30. And so normally here it would have everything that happened, but today is what? Friday. So there's nothing there. No meetings were scheduled for today. But it would have been there if they were. And it would say adjourned, in process, whatever, based on the status of that meeting. And then you can click where it says view upcoming meetings. So we're going to view the upcoming meetings. So in the House, you can see all the committee meetings there. And you see, if you click here, you can see their whole weekly schedule for the House. That's the only thing I don't like about the legislative website. Everything you click opens a new tab instead of the tab opening. So then if you're like me and you're spending significant time on there, you end up with 5 million tabs open across your screen. And then you're trying to figure out which one is the one you're looking at, and it get real confusing sometimes. The Senate has some pretty interesting things that are on the schedule for next week, Monday and Tuesday. And then there's some joint committee meetings. What's a joint committee? Does anybody know? They're special. They contain people from both.
Both houses.
And so that's there. So we're going to click on judiciary. And so you can see here what so it starts at 10. It's in the Hankel room. And there's 3 bills that are on the agenda for that day. And they're all about courts in New Orleans or Orleans Parish. And so at the bottom, it'll tell you all those things about if you don't want to appear in person, if you still want to give testimony, all that good stuff. And it's got all those rules, right? Like I said, PowerPoints have to be received. You have to email them at least 24 hours before. You can't use the thumb drives. It has to be approved first. And if it's not approved, they have to, So it's got all this stuff down here. And then you can click each bill. Now, this is the most important. How many of you have seen this before? Y'all look at this all the time? Who can tell me where I want to go if I actually want to read the bill? Where I click on this page. Text.
Yeah.
So it tells you the number of the bill. SB, if it says SB, it's a what? Senate bill. If it says HB, it's a what? House bill. And so then it tells you which senator brought it. Jay Morris. If you didn't know Jay Morris, you could do what? Click on his name, and it would tell you what district he's from and what his phone number is and all this good stuff about him. All right, so we're going to click text, and we're going to, it just only has one thing. So what does that mean?
It hasn't been amended.
It hasn't been changed. That bill has not, it's still early in the process. So there's the bill, and it goes through all of the text. What are those numbers on the side there for? Does anybody know?
No.
They're line numbers. So sometimes when they're talking about them, when they're debating that stuff, they'll go, in line 11, it says, so it makes it easier for you to follow along, right? And for them, it's really more for them because but yeah. So that's all there. And this is my favorite part of a bill. This is my absolute favorite part. Most time when I'm looking at a bill, I scroll to this first. Mm-hmm. Do anybody know why?
It's like the bill, but like for dummies.
It's the Cliff Notes.
Yeah.
The digest is the Cliff Notes. It tells you what the law, if there's a present law, right? Because if there's not one, it wouldn't say anything. But right now, this is an existing thing. So it tells us what the rules for the present law is, and then it tells us what this bill proposes that they change about that law, and then this kind of gives you like a summary of the differences and what it would do, right? And then it gives you an effective date for when, if this passes, it would actually start to be enforced. And then at the bottom, it tells you which law it actually amends, right? So let's say it says present law, and you're like, I want to read that full law. Then you can take this citation down here from the revised statutes, go on that search page, and pull up that whole bill. You can compare them or do whatever you want to do, right? I always look at the digest first just to see if I understand what's really going on, and then if I don't, then I start looking at the full stuff. Because sometimes I don't be knowing what they be talking about. And so up here it tells you too the number, the session, the bill number, and it'll say original. What if it wasn't the original? What would it say over there?
Not original.
I don't know.
I mean, yeah, but
No, I don't know.
we done said the word
Amended
or engrossed.
Engrossed, there
Yep.
we go.
So, and then you can also click there and go straight to the digest. And then here you can see the authors. Is it always one author of a bill? Nope. Why does it say primary?
Multiple.
This one doesn't have multiple, but it's because he's the main one, right? That's actually a pretty funny thing because lately I've been hearing, not here in Louisiana, but there was some discussions about legislators in Texas and who had actually been effective and what they did. And people were like, that person didn't write any bills. They didn't do anything during their term. But if you look at what people consider, they say that because she wasn't the primary author of those bills, right? They weren't seeing her name there, wherever it is on the Texas website. But that person had actually passed the same number of bills as the person they were comparing them to. She was just a co-author. So it's funny how that works. So let's go back. Now, what if you don't know who your legislator is? Or if you already on here, what does it say right here?
Who are my legislators?
And you can type in a little information, your little address, and it's gonna show you right there. Let's say you had a question about some of the money connected to some of these bills. Where would you go? Where do you think you would go?
I'm guessing that's the fiscal information.
Fiscal information. Yep. What if you wanted to see? What if there was a bill that you were real interested in? And you forgot to put the committee hearing date on your calendar, and it was last week. You think you could watch that committee hearing still?
They're archived.
They're archived. If you go here to broadcast archives, you can go to. They go back forever. One time, I'm gonna tell y'all what I did. One time, I was bored, and I was like, I want to see what laws they was passing the year I was born. And so I was like, it's 1988. So you can look at all the stuff. But it's pretty cool. And you can see the roll call voting records, right? You can see who voted for what. If you're trying to decide if you want somebody to stay in a seat, and you're like, I got to remember what they voted for on these education bills, because I wouldn't, all of this stuff right there. Let's go back out. And I'm going to show y'all my favorite thing. I don't know if mine is logged in right now. Nope, it's not. So if you go all into the end, that little tab that says My Legis, you can make an account. There's how you set it up. Let me see. Is this thing gonna show my password? I don't want y'all to see my password. I don't know. It's gonna show my password. Oh, I can't show y'all. I was gonna show y'all what it looked like, but I can't see my password. But on the My Legis account, it has a little box when you log in. You have a name, you say your password once you log in, and it has a little box, kind of like the search screen. Let's see, if I go to bills, I go to this session. It's kind of like this. See, it says HB, SB. It's got HSR. What are those? What are those with the R's at the end? Anybody know? Resolutions. What's the difference between a resolution and a bill?
It won't be a law.
Why does that matter? What does that mean?
It's not enforceable, really.
It's not enforceable. Yeah. So basically, a resolution, and there's more details on that inside the workbook. And for those of you who are watching the stream, the workbook will be available digitally. You just have to get in touch with us to get it. But yes, a resolution it's I guess the legal term for it, it's an opinion of the House or the entire legislature, depending on which way it goes. It's something they don't disagree with. There's something they think should be put into practice, but it's not actually a law. So I'll tell you guys a story. I was a part of a group that worked on a particular measure that would allow video visitations for children that had parents that were incarcerated, right? If they had a positive relationship with that parent can go to their graduation by video, right? And we got really excited, and there was a press conference, and there was all this stuff, and then some time went by, and we were like, y'all know any kids that got to go to the... And they were like, no. I'm like, okay. And then some more time went by, and we was like, do y'all know any? And they was like, no. And then we realized it was a resolution that had passed with no objection, because we were all excited. We passed a law. There was no objection to that. And it wasn't a law. It was a resolution. And so it was something that they agreed with, that they thought should happen, but it wasn't something they were actually going to make happen. And so then, now we're trying to go back and do all these different things to actually have that a thing. So if you have these ideas, right? We just talked about having that idea of approaching a legislator. Make sure that you have it in the proper format. If it's something that needs to be enforceable, or if it's something, sometimes things really do just need to be resolutions. Just saying the state of Louisiana feels this way about this particular thing. But that bill search box like that, you have that inside your legislature account. And I'm going to type a number in of a bill that I was ranting about earlier. We're going to look at it here. It pertains to children in foster care. It's House Bill 584. It's brought by Delisha Boyd. And if you looked at the text there, so this bill is very, I just hit the microphone. This bill is very important to me personally. And so I want to know when this bill is in committee. And if I miss it in committee, I want to know when the next day it comes up. I want to know what else is happening. I want to know if it's changed, right? So when you create that My Legislature account, you can actually save them and receive notifications. You can save up to 100, which sounds like a lot, but there's 1,300 bills in session, so it's really not that many. But you can also take them all, like right as they make their way through the like if you know something, if a bill has died, take it off of your list and add something else that you're interested in, right? So it helps you track those things a little more easily. So it's pretty cool. And again, if you want more information about the committees, you can click it and you can see exactly who's in what committee, what that committee does. All this is going to open a new tab for everything we click. And then, and then here the great thing is you can see when their last meetings were, when they were. You can look at the minutes, you can watch it, you can see the roll call, you see everything. So like I said, our legislature website is very comprehensive, and it's the best tool, especially as a regular person. If you don't know nothing, you just come on here and search it. Everything is right there at the tips of your fingers, including all the actual laws, all the actual revised statutes. Sometimes people go, well, I didn't know that was a law, or you can look it up. You don't have to make a trip to the law library or do those things, because it's right there in the palm of your hand, because you can access this on mobile as well. In your workbooks, for those of you who are here in person, all this stuff is in there. But I want you to flip, while we're talking about the committees and the committee members, you flip, there's a committee contact sheet right here. It's actually the last few pages of the workbook. It's quite a few pages. But the reason why, if you look at these, anytime you're a legislator, your contact information has to be public record. But particularly these committee members are the committees. I put all the ones that are, one, extremely pertinent to the work that we do here at For a Better Bayou, and then two, the ones that we know are from our areas, right? The 5 parish area. So if you need to know at the tip of your finger which committee member to call about a CO2 pipeline, and you live in Calcasieu or Allen or Burgard, their name is on this list. And so I wanted to highlight that because there's a lot of legislation this session about a lot of those things, and those are hot button issues. There are things that we should be paying attention to. Eminent domain, right? The seizure of our personal land that we bought or that our grandparents gave us for the use for these corporations. There's also the context for the committee members that would affect wildlife and fisheries. There's a lot of stuff going on in Cameron right now, and these are the people that you would need to reach out to if you're affected by that and you want to express your concerns about these legislative measures. So I wanted to put that kind of like at your fingertips so that you didn't necessarily have to search the website. It's just there. At the last page of the website, there's also some links. One, including the legislator website, is legis.la.gov. But there's also some other things like your rights when you go to these, the procedures for committees, because there's other rules, right? We only have so much time. And so there's tons of other rules that they have to follow that you can call them out about if you feel like something that wasn't done appropriately, or that if you have questions about things, or if you have something that you feel like there's a bill and you have an idea for an amendment and they're already in the middle of this process, there are still things that you can do. And so all that is explained in those procedure guides that are there, and then also our website. Although if you're here, you probably know our website, but still, just want to give it to you anyway. But thank you guys so much for coming out tonight. I really wish next time I do this, I gotta make this longer because there's a lot more stuff that I wanted to get to. But being that one, it was a Friday night, I didn't want to keep everybody all night, and there's all kinds of stuff. But we are gonna go further in detail, and of course, if you guys have anything in particular that you would like us to have a workshop about when it comes to civic engagement, or any questions about rules, policies, politics, running for office, whatever it is, let us know, and we will do our best to accommodate that. So thank y'all again for coming out tonight. Did y'all have any questions? Any other questions than what we already asked?
Do you think it's helpful if there's a bill in committee that you're opposed to and you can't make it to go testify, to call or email all of those committee members?
Yes.
Okay.
So let me say something about that. It gets kind of discouraging sometimes calling or emailing them and all those things. Yeah. A lot of times you get staffers. The staffers sometimes can be, first of all, I try not to get upset with them because can you imagine answering thousands of phone calls every day? Yeah. It's a lot. Yeah. So they're usually very brisk, for lack of any other word to say it. They're trying to get you off the phone because the other lines are ringing, that kind of thing. But those messages do get to them. So I think it's effective, yeah. But the most effective thing, and I say this all the time, is to be there. Yeah. Now, I know everybody can't always go to Baton Rouge, but if it's something that means something to you, right? If there's a bill on education and you have kids that are in the school that's being affected by that, take off, drive to Baton Rouge, carpool, get your neighbors, get somebody else with you. That's actually something that James about to kill me. There's actually something that I would like to work on. We actually were trying to figure out how to do it this session, and I could not. Man, I mean, everything has just been moving so fast, and so we weren't able to organize that. But what we would like to do is organize some sort of carpool or caravan for, especially some of the issues that are affecting people around here, like the stuff in Cameron. I don't know if you guys know, there's the dredging issue with the oysters and all that's affected. There's actually a bill to create like an oyster task force that I didn't even know was a thing until I was going through the agendas, and I was like, whoa, what's this? So that stuff like that directly affects us and directly affects the economy here and directly affects the citizens. We need to be there on those days, because I'll tell you 100%, if there is no presence from your community when this stuff is there, you get overlooked. You get overlooked. There was last year when all the stuff was coming up, there were a lot of, and I've said it over and over even today, there were several bills about juvenile justice. and there was one in particular that dealt with parishes that didn't have separate courtrooms to do certain things. And I don't know if you guys know, but we don't have when a child is charged as an adult here. Depending on where they fall in the docket, they end up sitting outside in the back of the car with a police officer because they can't go in at the same time as the other adults because there's laws and protections and stuff around that. And they were going to do things that was going to make that worse. There were going to be more kids sitting out there in those cars for hours. And that costs us money because we have to pay that officer to sit there all day. And that car has to run all day because they can't be out there in the heat, right? So that's gas. So there's all these things that would have affected the budget, would have affected all the court dockets, like a lot of stuff. And there was nobody from Calcasieu Parish that was in there to provide testimony about that but me. And all these other parishes that were going to be affected by it had their sheriff's association were there. They had their ADAs and all these people that worked in the system that didn't agree with it. They were like, hey, y'all are going to make our jobs harder. Regardless of how I feel about what you're saying about these kids being tried, and ultimately, you're going to mess up our budgets and you're going to make our jobs harder. And then you had parents of these kids that were in these situations telling their stories. You had all these, just tons of people from all these different parishes. And then me from Calcasieu. And when they got to it, they were like, oh, we didn't even know Calcasieu was on that. And I was like, yeah, we are. We are. And then there happened to be a public defender that works in Orleans now that actually when she started, she adjudicated juvenile cases here. And she was like, yeah. So she got up and she kind of backed me up, right? And so it became the thing. And so that particular measure ended up being amended. But if you're not there, if you can't speak up for that, then you're not included in those discussions. You have to be there. So yes, it's very important to call them, email them, whatever. But the most important thing you can do is go. And I really wish we would go. We don't go. We need to go. We don't go to the city council meeting. I can tell you, it's the same. It's a club. It's the same people that know each other every time we go in there because it's only us, right? Everybody has to start going to this stuff, guys, because that's where our voice are. That we have the power. We just gotta learn how to wield it. And you can't wield it if you're not there. So, good question. Thank you. Any other questions?